Dear Mother and Father, I have gone away to walk aboard an alien spaceship. As recurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage to explore the vast universe, then return. I am leaving behind all my possessions to you, as I will no longer require the use of any. Please use the instructions in my will as a guide to help. Love, Granger. After writing the note for his mom and dad, he headed out to one of his favorite spots, Boss Grill, to get some dinner. As he was eating, the aliens were blazing through space in their UFO headed to Earth to pick up Granger Taylor for a 42-month trip around the universe. Or did something else unexplainably earthly happen? Regardless of what truly happened, one thing is clear. Granger was never seen again. Welcome to No Closure, where we shine a light on the dark reality of the 600,000 people that go missing each year, and the 90,000 that are never seen again. And that's just in the US alone. People go missing for many reasons, and we delve into some truly unexplained disappearances, mysterious vanishings, and some other very controversial missing persons cases you don't want to miss. On a very dark and extremely stormy night with torrential rain and wind so strong it was knocking over electrical lines and uprooting trees, in November 29th of 1980, Granger Taylor left a note for his mom and dad, saying he was going to board a spacecraft and go on a journey across the universe. A 42-month voyage through the stars and planets. Why 42 months, you might be asking yourself right now, just as I was curious about such a specific number. Well, this got me thinking about my brother telling me this was his favorite number, and when I asked why, he said it's the number from which all meaning is derived. Life, the universe, and everything. I was like, what? Turns out it comes from a very popular science fiction novel written by Douglas Adams in 1979, called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And as the story goes, Granger was a big fan of sci-fi. He even built a spaceship of his very own on his mom and dad's property. He built it with 2 satellite dishes he had foraged from a junkyard and put it on stilts, so it hovered above the ground. With the help of the neighborhood youngsters, he turned that UFO into his office. He equipped it with a wood-burning stove, a couch, TV, and filled it with sci-fi books and material. This was in 1979, the same year The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was published. Coincidence with the 42 months he was going on the interstellar trip? Or something else like the pieces of the puzzle coming together? That's the question. Many things in this tale seem to be coincidental, and I personally don't believe in coincidences. Everything happens for a reason, whether it be explainable and understandable to us in our limited knowledge or not. He spent most of that year, and the next, 1980, in the flying saucer office researching alien technology. He was a very smart and innovative man who was actually referred to as a mechanical genius. He actually got bored with rudimentary public schooling and dropped out in 8th grade. He then began an apprenticeship at a local auto shop his neighbor owned and operated. After a year of doing that, he felt he learned all his neighbor had to teach him and broke out on his own. This is when he started building and rebuilding things on his family's farm property. So alongside building his own spaceship, he also rebuilt a World War II airplane. And on top of that, he hauled an old train out of the woods to rebuild it. It took him 2 years to rebuild the train, and when he was done, he got the idea to lay down tracks for it on the farm to take the neighborhood kids on train rides. This is when something very strange and unexplainable happened. About 2 months after he had gathered the parts for the tracks, on New Year's Eve 1969 at about 5 a.m., 4 nurses at Cowichan District Hospital, which was very near to Granger's home, were working the night shift, when one of the nurses named Doreen Kendall was caught off guard when something absolutely crazy caught her eye. Something extremely bright turned her attention toward the window, and what she saw was, as she described it, a brightly lit flying saucer hovering silently, 3 stories above ground outside the window, with 2 human-like creatures piloting the craft on the other side of the cockpit window. This is when her 3 fellow nurses joined her, and they all 4 witnessed the craft move noiselessly behind some trees, and then whoosh, it disappeared into the night. Through that morning and all into the next day, the people in and around the town of Duncan also reported seeing the spaceship flying around town and the regions surrounding it. This was the talk of the town for months. Eventually, Granger caught wind of this, and he was absolutely amazed and obsessed with these accounts. This even inspired him to get his pilot's license and to rebuild an old Kitty Hawk plane that he eventually sold to a private collector when he got bored of traditional aeronautics. This is around the time he built his UFO office and became obsessed with building a propulsion system for a flying saucer. He had his head buried in the science fiction books and material in his UFO for about 2 years. This is where he could be found. It was all fun and games till he built a radio that allowed him to communicate with aliens. Well, actually, the way it goes is that the aliens didn't really communicate with him through the radio. They actually communicated with him telepathically. He told his friends that he thought the aliens finally decided to communicate with him because he built that radio and was trying so hard to communicate with them. He said he had several conversations with them, and of course he asked them how the propulsion system on their craft worked. They didn't give him the complete layout, but said it had to do with magnetism. And here we go with another coincidence. A few years before Granger had these conversations in 1950, Transport Canada created a UFO program, and it was funded by the Canadian government till 1954, and then went on without that funding until 1962. And the name of the project was, you gotta be kidding, Project Magnet. So was he really such a mechanical genius that an alien race chose to communicate with him? Maybe take him on a trip through space and show him how their spacecraft worked and ask him for ideas on innovating or building new spacecraft. Or did something more earthly sinister happen to him? Well, the morning after he vanished from Bob's Grill in Duncan, a small town on southern Vancouver Island, and his parents found the note taped to their bedroom door. They called the police, and alongside the police they searched for Granger for months and never found him or anything relating back to him. The thing is, according to CBC, a Canadian news source, Canadians report seeing UFOs in the sky at a rate of 3 times a day. On September 6, 2023 in BC, a man caught on camera what he believes is a UFO over Vancouver Island. That's where Granger vanished from? Yes, he did vanish years earlier, but this many sightings and a video of a UFO right over the island Granger resided on really makes you think. Dan Berg, a man who works in the fishing industry, said he was outside at around 10 o'clock at night and something caught his eye. It was a series of glowing lights. He said he thought it might have been a drone, but it was too bright. So he grabbed his phone and started recording. He recorded for 45 minutes and said, quote, "I thought I'd seen something like it on the internet from other people, but I never seen anything like it again," unquote. Will the disappearance of Granger Taylor forever remain a mystery? Well, back on Earth, in March of 1986, 6 years after the disappearance, a forest worker came upon a tremendous unnatural crater in the earth and began checking it out. He saw many pieces of metal debris scattered about a circumference of 1 to 200 feet. He knew something was not right about this, so called the authorities. When the RCMP converged on the site, they eventually identified the pieces of scrap metal as pieces of a blown-up vehicle. This site was also recognized to be a blast site, as if some sort of major explosion occurred here. As they continued to search, they found pieces as far as 600 feet away and up to 60 feet in the trees. This was like the site of a bomb drop. Everyone was very bewildered as to what happened here. All of this was located near Mount Prevost in BC, which was not far from the Taylor family farm from which Granger disappeared. It came to light later that some dynamite, up to a case they thought, had gone missing from the farm the night Granger vanished. It is also known that he was familiar with the use of explosives. The Taylors were licensed to have dynamite on their farmland. They used it for blasting out large tree stumps and shaping the land for farming. The police continued to rummage and search the scene, and through doing this they were able to figure out the metal debris was from a motor vehicle. Eventually they were able to find a piece that had the VIN number on it. VIN being the vehicle identification number used to identify the make and model as well as the owner of the vehicle. They then ran that number and it came back to a Datsun truck that was owned by Granger Taylor. Surprisingly, a piece of Granger's shirt as well as bone fragments were found around the massive blast site. So we hear bone fragments, we think DNA. Well, they were found in 1986 and we had no clue what DNA even was at that time. So the coroner doing pathology work on the bone said he attributed the adult bones to Granger Taylor. But in reality, he couldn't even conclude if the bones were male or female, and the RCMP said the cloth fragments of the shirt were identified to be from a shirt his mother had sewn for him not long before his vanishing. But his mother said she affirmed no such thing. And really, through that explosion and 6 years in the harsh climate of BC, would they actually find and be able to say this little fragment of sweater was his? So with this, the BC's coroner office officially declared Granger Taylor dead, and the strange and mysterious story of his plight was closed. But was it really? The cause of death listed on the report was listed as massive injury due to consequences of an explosion. This finding was based on circumstantial evidence at the site. Circumstantial being the key word. Basically what they are inferring is that he accidentally blew himself up, or even worse, ended his life by explosion. Who does that? I've never in my life heard of someone doing their self in by explosion. Would that be going out with a bang? His young friend Robert Keller, who was 15 at the time and helped him build that spaceship of his, now disputes that evidence, stating it isn't conclusive, and goes on to say Granger was anything but suicidal. Quote, "Granger was the most intelligent, down-to-earth, wise man that I've ever met in my life." Unquote. He also went on to say the truck the RCMP say they identified as a Datsun and being Granger's was not even his truck. They said the truck was blue, and when Keller had seen him that day, he was driving a pink truck. He also says the coroner basically said, quote, "Oh well, it was Granger," unquote. Really? Sorry, I have to laugh at that because he closed the case saying he felt it was Granger. But it was a bone fragment that was inconclusive as to if it was even male or female, and ended with, "Oh my God, maybe that's how they did things back then." And regarding the he blew himself up assumption, well, like I said before, he was familiar with explosives. To top that off, when someone interested in the case came back later looking for the bone fragments to run DNA tests on them. Now that this technology was available, the bones seemed to vanish, just like Granger did. The RCMP no longer had the fragments in their possession. Well, this begs the question, did they even find bones in the first place? Just like the supposed sweater fragment his mother said she never confirmed. So what do we make of this wild vanishing case? It seems at every turn or question answered, there's two more questions. While others who have never even met Granger have put forth their theories that he relocated to Colombia. He did have friends in Colombia. Or even crazier, he was kidnapped by the US government to work at Area 51, the remote airbase in the Nevada desert that is the center of many alien conspiracies. The government did basically kidnap the Nazi scientist Werner von Braun from Germany. Why not Granger Taylor from Canada? His close friend Robert Keller truly believes whatever the RCMP found or didn't find on that mountain had nothing to do with Granger, and he says he can kind of get on board with the Area 51 theory. Or did he actually hitchhike his way onto a spaceship to his own real-life guide to the galaxy? Or did an explosion get the best of him, either by his own volition or accident? The Unsolved Mysteries podcast ran a two-part special on March 24th, 2021, about his case where his friend Robert Keller gives his thoughts on the insane vanishing of Granger Taylor, his close buddy. On the podcast, the host Taylor Hooper talks with Granger's friend Robert Keller about all the aspects of the case. They converse about many of the things we've talked about here and ask many questions we are asking. A member of law enforcement, Chris Manso, joins them and speaks about the explosion and the chemical makeup of dynamite. He talks about how when dynamite gets old, it becomes what they call sweaty dynamite, that becomes very unstable. Through my research, this is when the main explosive chemical called nitroglycerin separates from the stabilizing chemical and leaks from the casing, at which point it becomes very unstable and dangerous. It can easily be set off by friction or a little spark. Chris says it is actually not that unstable, like someone just throwing a stick and upon landing it blows up. It's not like the movies. He says that a great quality about dynamite is that it's not that unstable. He goes on to say there may have been an accidental fire, maybe a spark or some other thing that could have set it off. But in his 15 years in law enforcement, he's never seen an accidental dynamite discharge. Tyler Hooper also touches on what we discussed earlier about Granger's competency with handling dynamite, saying, "I find it hard to believe that Granger would accidentally set off dynamite." He also talks about how when dynamite gets wet, it can become unstable also, and we know it was the storm of the century outside that night. But then again refers back to Granger's mechanical genius and knowledge of dynamite, saying, "I don't see him being careless in such a situation." Now he asks the million-dollar question we've all been asking. Why did he drive up the mountain in the middle of the night in a raging rain and thunderstorm with a truck full of dynamite? Not believing the explosion to be accidental, he asks, what was his motive for setting off a massive amount of dynamite that dark and rainy night? Was he trying to not leave a trace of his vanishing? Was that even the remnants of his stuff that was found? Or maybe he was signaling the aliens of his location? Well, I'm signaling you right now because you're watching this wild video which shows me you're interested in strange and unexplainable stories, and you can now get 3 free months of Audible with my link below the video right above the description, and read or listen to more about this crazy case and many others through or audiobooks with Audible. I actually listened to one of those audiobooks for a little part of this video, so go check it out. You won't be sorry. Now, the show Never Seen Again also did a show about Granger on October 10th, 2022 on the Paramount Plus network, and this goes to show this case is still widely questioned to this day. So, with everything we've gone over, what I'd like to believe is that he's getting his own personal guide to the galaxy by hitchhiking his way onto an alien spacecraft. 42. My friend? 42. Let me know what you guys think about Granger Taylor's mystifying tale. And if you think the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was his ticket to ride in the comments, thank you so very much for watching, and please like, subscribe and hit the bell icon right next to subscribe to stay notified on up-and-coming crazy vanishings, unexplainable disappearances, and the dark psychology of abductors and why they take people against their will. Be vigilant of your surroundings and don't leave your family with no closure.